Ravenwood Heights. The name alone carried the weight of empires, a world where money whispered louder than truth, and the Ashfords were the gods who ruled it. Their glass towers kissed the skies of every continent, their name printed on oil rigs, banks, and billion-dollar foundations. But for all their wealth, they were a family built on silence, and silence, as fate would soon show, had a way of screaming when least expected. Lord Reginald Ashford, patriarch of the dynasty, was a man of absolute control. His word could shift markets, and his signature could end careers. Yet, he carried a secret that even his closest advisors didn't know, one that began 27 years ago in a quiet coastal village far from the glittering skyline of Ravenwood. It was the secret of a son, born of a woman the world had never heard of. Miles away, in that same forgotten town, a young man named Elias Ward was finishing another day at the docks. Life had taught him simplicity: wake, work, sleep, repeat. He knew nothing of grand fortunes or gilded halls. But his blood carried something ancient and powerful, something that had been hidden from him his entire life. His mother, Clara Ward, had raised him alone. Gentle but guarded, she avoided questions about his father. Her eyes often wandered to the horizon as though watching a ghost she once loved. Elias had always felt the weight of something unspoken. He didn't know why he sometimes woke up from dreams of marble corridors or why the sight of luxury cars in the city made his chest tighten. There was a rhythm in him that didn't belong to the life he lived. One stormy evening, Clara fell gravely ill. On her hospital bed, her hand trembling, she pressed an old, worn envelope into Elias's palm. "If I don't make it," she whispered, "find this man. He will tell you who you are." When Elias opened the envelope, the name printed there almost didn't seem real: Lord Reginald Ashford. Alongside the name was a faded photograph, a much younger Reginald, arm around a woman who looked just like Clara. Days later, after Clara passed, Elias packed the few things he owned and boarded a bus heading toward the city. Ravenwood Heights gleamed in the distance, a world he'd never belonged to, until now. But destiny was already waiting for him in its golden shadows. The Ashford mansion was not a house, it was a monument. Chandeliers taller than trees, portraits of ancestors painted with haunting precision, and a quiet that felt alive. Inside, Reginald Ashford sat at the head of a long mahogany table as the family gathered for their quarterly dinner. His wife, Lady Evelyn Ashford, graceful yet cold, watched her husband with the studied detachment of a woman who had long mastered the art of silence. Their two children, Alexander, the heir apparent, and Celeste, the darling of society, whispered about their next charity gala when the butler entered with a hesitant knock. "Sir," he said quietly, "there's a young man here to see you. He says it's urgent. His name is Elias Ward." Reginald's fork froze mid-air. For a split second, his composure faltered. He rose slowly, excused himself, and followed the butler into the grand foyer. There, standing nervously in worn shoes and holding a crumpled envelope, was Elias. The silence between them was almost unbearable. Reginald's eyes widened as if seeing a ghost from a life he'd buried long ago. "What do you want?" he asked sharply. Elias swallowed. "Answers." When Reginald unfolded the photograph Elias handed him, time seemed to stop. He remembered that summer, the one he'd spent away from the chaos of boardrooms, when he was still a man capable of love. Clara had been the only person who'd seen him as human, not a legacy. "I'm your son," Elias said quietly. The words struck Reginald harder than he expected. For the first time in years, his empire felt small. But behind the grand staircase, Lady Evelyn had been listening. Her world began to crack. If this boy was who he claimed to be, then the perfect Ashford image was about to crumble, and she would not let that happen. The next morning, rumors spread through the estate like wildfire. Celeste confronted her father, her voice trembling. "Is it true? That boy? He's yours?" Reginald avoided her gaze, which was all the answer she needed. Meanwhile, Alexander saw Elias not as a brother but as a threat. The Ashford inheritance was a global empire worth billions, and now, a stranger from nowhere stood between him and destiny. Reginald arranged for a private DNA test, his hands shaking as he signed the papers. The results came days later, delivered in a sealed envelope. Reginald read them alone in his study. The truth hit him like thunder: Elias Ward, 99.9% biological match. For a long time, he sat in silence. Then, slowly, he smiled. "It's time the world met my son." Elias's arrival at the Ashford press gala was the spark that ignited the storm. Cameras flashed as Reginald proudly announced his long-lost son to the world. Headlines exploded across every media outlet. The secret Ashford heir revealed. Lady Evelyn smiled for the cameras, but her fury simmered beneath the surface. Alexander, humiliated, stormed out. Celeste watched in silence, torn between fascination and fear. For the public, it was a fairy tale reunion. For the family, it was the beginning of war. Behind closed doors, Evelyn whispered to Alexander. "We cannot let him take what is yours. Do you understand?" "Yes," Alexander replied, his jaw clenched. "Then we destroy him." They studied her file. No university degree, no refined reference, only a patchwork of street receipts and a fierce, practical intelligence. "How will she fit into our world?" his mother asked, not cruelly, only practically. "She's uneducated." Amara answered with frankness. "I can learn." David's father considered. Education is not only books. But you must be presentable, aware, and able to navigate certain social expectations. The family agreed to a trial, let Amara spend time with tutors and advisors, and the household would evaluate. The sentence felt like both mercy and conditional exile. Yet Amara accepted because the thing she loved was not a title, but a man who had chosen her. As she left the great house that evening, she felt something that was new and terrifying, the sense of a future opening its jaw like a promise. Even with the family's tentative acceptance, small reservations hardened into objections. The Olorunsola household had standards and unseen rules, and Amara moved awkwardly within them. She made mistakes, misunderstood a seating order at a charity luncheon, mistook a polite joke for an insult, wore a color that did not match the tone of an evening. Those mistakes traveled fast in a house where gossip was economy. The family's whispers became organized. Visiting cousins floated ideas about distances and decorum. There were private conversations about lineage and leverage. A woman from a certain background could better solidify business alliances. Amara, with her street-born vowels and blunt speech, did not fit this ledger. One chilly morning, David's father called his son into the study. There was gravity in the way he shut the blinds. "David," he said, "our name matters. I love you, but we cannot endorse a match that will cost us capital, social and otherwise." The words hit harder because they were not venom, they were practical. David argued. He mentioned willingness to marry, trust, the contentment he felt. He tried to make his father see that character and heart could outweigh pedigree. But the old man saw in pedigree the scaffolding of survival, a scaffolding built from generations of careful alliances. "You must choose, son, us, or her," the father said, the phrase like a surgeon's incision. Before Elias could confront his father, an explosion rocked the estate's west wing. Flames engulfed the guest quarters. Everyone screamed. Reginald barely made it out alive, but the fire conveniently destroyed all the financial records, the same ones that would have proven Elias's innocence. Evelyn's crocodile tears filled the news, painting Elias as the jealous bastard who set the fire. Within hours, his face was plastered across tabloids, "Ashford imposter wanted for arson." Elias fled into the night, the empire he never wanted now hunting him down. Weeks passed. Ravenwood buzzed with speculation. Reginald lay in a private hospital, his empire in chaos. Evelyn and Alexander tightened their grip, spinning the media to their advantage. But Celeste, guilt-ridden and torn, began to doubt her mother. In a desperate act, she met with Elias in secret. "You have to expose them," she whispered. "Father needs to know the truth." Elias nodded. He had found Victor Kane, a broken man living in exile, and the truth Victor revealed was far worse than anyone imagined. The Ashford fortune had been built on betrayal, cover-ups, and one hidden crime that could send the entire family to ruin. Reginald regained consciousness on a stormy night. Elias entered the hospital room quietly, a file in his hand. Their eyes met, father and son, bound by blood and secrets. "I know everything," Elias said. "About the fire. About Victor. About how you built all of this." Reginald's expression was unreadable. "Then you know," he said slowly, "that none of us are innocent." Before Elias could reply, the door burst open. Evelyn stood there, a gun trembling in her hand. "You should have stayed dead, boy," she hissed. A thunderclap roared outside. The lights flickered. A single gunshot echoed through the corridor. And then silence. To be continued. Thank you for listening to another story from Voice of a Mom. If this touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Because somewhere out there, another heart needs this story too.